Welcome to Talking Points. My name is Dr. Stephen E. Gardner. I'm with you today to continue our series on Tell Me Something That I Didn't Know About the Beatitudes. Now we're getting pretty close to the end of this series, and I'm hoping that this series has given you an opportunity to begin to look at the words of Jesus in this particular context through the Beatitudes, that you can see those things in a new and a living way. I know a lot of things that we've learned about the Beatitudes and stuff just in general tradition within church and so on and so forth has been accepted as an acceptable norm. But sometimes if we just stay on the surface of tradition and never go beyond that, we're going to miss many truths that were there all along that's just been waiting to be explored or waiting to be discovered. And that's what we've ran into when we started talking about Beatitudes. Thus far, we've gone from the very beginning on the etymology of what the word beatitude means. It's a word that also is a macarism. We've also looked at how that macarisms or beatitudes are things that are just not specific to the Bible, but it's specific to all cultures. Every culture has some sort of macarism that's associated either in poetry or just, things that they just share from time to time with others, with their community, with their tribe, whatever the case it might be. Well, what's so important here, and this is particularly focused to those who are Christ followers or who desire to follow the Christ, is what was Jesus saying to that group of people? We talked about this from time to time, that, look, the things that were said in the Bible have a context, which means Jesus is talking to an audience that pretty much, of everyday Galileans, more of a peasant class. That was pretty much his following. But there were other elite classes of individuals there that as well. But primarily his message was to those on the periphery. And we live in a day and time to where people on the periphery, they don't have a voice and they need good news. And so Jesus related to those people that didn't have a voice. He brought good news. As the scripture says in Luke 4:18, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He's anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor, to preach deliverance to the captives. He came to bring good news. And so when we relate that message to our time today, we're still in a day and time where people that are marginalized, people that are broken, bruised, and battered, people that don't have a voice still need good news. So let's go into today's topic. Tell me something that I didn't know about the Beatitudes, and let's see what we can learn today. In this segment, we're going to talk about things that make for peace. Things that make for peace. Peacemakers are known to be promoters and practitioners of a just society. Peacemakers are known to be promoters and practitioners of a just society. In our review and reflection, let's consider these 4 points. For Jesus' message to be good news, it had to resonate with the condition of his followers. We have said that from time and time again. For Jesus' message to be good news, it had to resonate with the condition or the situation or the circumstance of his followers. We also learned those who were poor, mourners, and meek were the same class of people. We've talked about how that some more contemporary approaches to the Beatitudes kind of talk about poor in spirit to be individuals that are destitute, spiritually destitute, and that God will bless them, if they desire him. But that is not the case of the context. Poor in spirit is best understood where the same beatitude is mentioned in the Gospel of Luke, where it says, "Blessed are you poor." And there, as it is in Matthew, was literally talking about those who were impoverished, those who were poor. Well, this group that were poor, mourners, and meek were the same class of people. This was the audience that followed Jesus. This was a group of people that Luke said that after he came out of the wilderness, that his fame spread throughout the region round about. Thirdly, Jesus' audience experienced oppression by the Roman system, and their leaders aligned with Rome. So they were getting oppression from two different directions. Not only Roman occupation, but also their own leaders that were in cahoots or aligned with Rome. And so they were getting a double oppression. And we can kind of see some of that today, that, that the system is not always fair. In fact, for many people that are marginalized, the system is not fair. And for individuals today, in trying to live and survive and thrive in a system that's not fair, we need to hear an alternative message. We need an alternative hope. Rather than try to look for hope in the system, we need to look beyond the system and find our hope in one who came to bring hope to all people. Fourthly, blessed ones have a deep thirst for justice, engage in acts of mercy, and maintain a pure heart. And we've gone into depth into what that looks like. And so if you haven't had the opportunity, I would encourage you to go back and watch all the episodes leading up to this one. And you'll learn about deep thirst for justice, engaging in acts of mercy, and what it means to maintain a pure heart. Well, we're in Matthew 5:9, and it says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." Now, let me say this before I go into explaining that. The lens that we're looking at, the word or the term blessed, is not about something that you will get by engaging in a particular action. It's about something that you already are. Being blessed and blessedness is a state. So we could say this in requoting or elaborating on this verse. Blessed ones engage in the business of peacemaking. And because they do so, others call them children of God. Here is the seventh macarism or beatitude that Christ conveyed to his followers. What is a peacemaker in this context? Especially when this group lived under oppression and Roman occupation. How can you be a peacemaker in a situation like this? Just what was Jesus saying to them? How did this beatitude resonate with them and eventually the people of the way? Well, today we're going to take a deep dive into the meaning of being a peacemaker. How do the Hebrew scriptures, that is the Old Testament, inform the concept of peacemaking that Jesus implies that his followers emulate? Congratulations to the peacemakers. The Romans had brought about the pacification of nations through the use of force, and emperors were hailed as bringers of peace. But the peacemakers in this beatitude are those who bring an end to strife between individuals. Peacemaking is a cardinal virtue in the rabbinic literature. Rabbi Hillel said, quote unquote, "Be of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing it." That's in the Mishnah. The Romans had brought about pacification of nations through the use of force, and their emperors hailed as bringers of peace. And so we see here that the Romans engaged in acts of violence to what? To get the nations to be in a state of pacification. And the peacemakers that we're talking about here are not pacifiers. This is not a state of pacification to say that blessed are those who are in a state of pacification, for they'll be called the children of God. I don't believe that God called humankind to be doormats, to be walked on. But on the contrary, that there are things that we can engage in that are contrary or that are a challenge to the system. Blessed are the peacemakers. And so rather than being like the Romans, Jesus is basically inferring and referring to something else. Even the rabbi here says, "Be of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing it." That's a challenge. That's kind of hard to do when the man is on you and that it seems like the system isn't fair. Let's take it a step further. An Old Testament reference to being a peacemaker can be found in the book of Proverbs 12 and 20. It says, "Deceit is in the heart of those who plot evil, but those who promote peace have joy." This verse emphasizes the importance of pursuing peace and harmony, contrasting it with deceit and evil intentions. So as we can see here that the Old Testament was really the basis of what the people of Israel lived on. And the Old Testament was the only set of scriptures that this group of followers, these Israelites in Jesus' time, relied on. They didn't have a New Testament. All they had was the law of Moses and the prophets, the law and the prophets. And what did Jesus say? "I have not come to what? Destroy the law, but to fulfill." And so basically, the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures, were the basis of their thought life, was the paradigm by which they understood covenant, by which they understood how to relate to each other, and how to deal with opposing forces such as the enemy. And so deceit is in the heart of those who plot evil, but those who promote peace have joy. Another Old Testament reference to being a peacemaker can be found in the book of Isaiah, In this case, chapter 52, verse 7. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, who publishes peace, who brings good news of happiness, who publishes salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns. So there you have it. Probably a most common verse. We've heard it many times. In fact, that same passage in Isaiah has been converted to songs that we've heard today. Your God reigns, etc. So the feet of those, the path of those who bring good news are beautiful. The path of those who publish peace are beautiful. Those who bring good news of happiness and who publishes salvation, who says, Zion, your God reigns. Those individuals are peacemakers. And those individuals' feet, their path, their example is beautiful. In this verse, the peacemaker is likened to someone with beautiful feet, symbolizing the value and the importance of those who bring messages of peace and good news to others. Their role in spreading peace and salvation is highly regarded. So, the ways of peace is the hermeneutical principle behind many enactments that were designed to foster peace and reduce friction. It is a major concern in Matthew, but I want to draw your attention to Romans 12 and 18. And I got my Bible here, and I just want to, here it is, 12 and 18, and it says this: if it be possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. And then let's jump over to James. What is James saying in this context? And James brings about a thought. And in James 3:18, it says this: in fact, we need to probably start at 17, but the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without a trace of partiality or hypocrisy. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace for those who make peace. I really like that, because you can see the opposite of that. And I'm not going to go and read it, but you get a chance, go back and read James 3:13 and kind of get the two kinds of wisdom that's being mentioned there. But then it ends by saying a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace for those who make peace. Well, examples of peacemaking are those who would leave the altar to seek reconciliation with one who has been offended. And you can go to Matthew 5:23 and 24, 17, 24 to 27, and even 18, 15 through 18. And we've read these passages where if you realize that you've offended somebody, and before you offer your gift, go and try to make reconciliation. Those who seek to reconcile with others, those who seek to make things right in relationships, are basically a peacemaker. Now let's flip it. A blessed one seeks to do that. A blessed one seeks to make sure that they've done everything that they possibly can do within their own power to make peace or to reconcile, especially if we've offended someone. If at all possible, live in peace with all men. Now we know that that's not always possible because there's some people, it doesn't matter how you behave on towards them. It doesn't matter. They're still going to be contrary. They're still going to act a certain kind of way. And so we can only do so much. But if we do the role of peacemaking in good conscience, we've done right in the sight of God. And lastly, we find there in Matthew 5:43 through 44, it says, those who love their enemies and pray for them. Praying for your enemies, now I didn't say you have to like them, but praying for your enemies is an act of peacemaking. And so these are the kinds of things that we can do. These are the kind of things that Jesus was implying, or that he was echoing what the Old Testament had already stated that they should be engaged in. They should be engaged in the act or the continuance of peacemaking. The action of a peacemaker implies a situation where peace is threatened or absent. You know, we need to be engaged in something when peace is threatened or absent. The social or social-political context is primarily in view. Peacemaking is a mode of response to hostility or other destabilizing activity. What is envisaged is not particularly intervention as a third party, but rather peace-seeking ways of handling one's own individual or corporate situation. Now, he's only echoing what the Old Testament, their covenant charter in the Hebrew scriptures had already outlined. But how does that speak to us today? Well, we can kind of look at Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement. It was a activity, it was a movement that was based upon being peacemakers. And they adopted a particular approach from Gandhi. So they adopted that strategy of being nonviolent and against a political system that was not fair toward them. And it was successful. Now, that was not to say that they did not incur certain kinds of pain or certain kinds of pushback. They did. Did not say that they would not be hosed or thrown in jail. They were. It did not say that they would not be lynched. Many were. However, the action of peacemaking will look for ways by which it can make a statement and not try to bring harm to others, but to bring an awareness of the social political condition that's not fair. So those are some of the things that we can see in our context how a peacemaker engaged. A.W. Argyle, in the Gospel according to Matthew in his rendering, points out that these are not appeasers, but those who actively overcome evil with good. Well, let's see what James, Jamison, and Fawcett and Brown have to say. It says, blessed are the peacemakers. It means this, who not only study peace, but diffuse it. Now, that word diffuse it means to spread it. We're not only just a student of it, but we also are a practitioner of it. We're not just a student of peace. We're not just looking for ways to make peace, but we're also seek to spread it. And blessed ones study peace, blessed ones spread peace. Those living under the reign of God actively pursue restoration of wholeness and well-being in a world shattered by hostility. So now this peace is just larger than just material or tangible peace, but it's about an aspect of wholeness and well-being in the world. It's about envisioning a just society, one that provides justice on all levels. One that peace, or that word irene, as it says in the Greek, is not just about, a sensation of stillness and calm, but it's also about being whole. It's also about well-being in the world around. So it's both internal and external, and we'll go into some of that. Kingdom citizens seek to permeate or penetrate society in ways that mend hostile relationships through actions and not just words. People say a lot of words today, but our actions speak louder. Kingdom citizens seek to penetrate society in ways that mend hostile relationships through their actions and not just words. Proclaiming the good news has always been more than just preaching. I'm going to say that one more time. Proclaiming the good news has always been more than just preaching. It is making the word become flesh when the chance presents itself. Now that's peacemaking. Well, if we're getting close to the end of this lesson today, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Jesus could be saying that to be a peacemaker, don't be like the oppressor. Don't treat your neighbor and your friends the way your oppressor treated you. I want to think that this is what Jesus was saying to them and us today. Because in order for it to be good news to them, it got to relate to their situation. Don't be like your oppressor. And when the time comes as a community, as they evolved into and became the people of the way, it had to be pilgrims, as it were, had to leave Jerusalem, it had to be in exile, as it were. Make sure that you don't treat your neighbor and those in your community the same way your oppressor has treated you. And we today must make sure that we don't adopt the ways of those who've oppressed us or have adopted ways of those who have furthered injustice or have made things difficult for us, even if it's profitable. And that's one of the reasons why people do the things that they do, why they engage in the same kind of action that the oppressor has engaged in. Because why? You can make money at it by putting somebody down and putting yourself up, or keeping people in their place so that it best serves your agenda or your particular worldview. Furthermore, we can say, replicate to others what you want replicated to you. The law of reciprocity is huge here. You reap what you sow. As peacemakers, we want to make sure that we sow peace. Blessed ones are engaged in the activity of finding ways to sow peace in the world, to make harmony around in society as what? Best we can. Didn't say that it's going to work all the time, but if we work it sometimes, eventually it gets worked in ways like you put yeast in the dough. It will rise. Do what you can, when you can. If you're filled with God and you're satisfied by Him, look for ways by which you can bring peace, bring wholeness, bring resolution, bring reconciliation in the community and in the relationships that are near and dear to your heart or within close proximity. Peacemakers show others how to have inward peace with God and how to be instruments of peace in the world. So we can see that a lot of these commentators agree that this peacemaker, this context is was that it was useful, the words of Jesus was useful for them, and a guide for them is useful for us, and a guide for us as well. There is an inner and an outer aspect of this peace. Jesus said, I have set the example before you. Before having peace with others, you must have peace within yourself. Following my path and drawing peace from an inner source, regardless of what you are going through in life, will give you a proper response to hostilities in the world. Well, I'm probably telling you something that you don't already know. And you're probably saying, wow, I never thought about looking at the Beatitudes like this. But clearly, this is a fresh way to look at it. And clearly, I've done the best that I can thus far in trying to get beneath the surface understanding and get into the original language and into the context by which the words of Jesus were spoken. I trust that you've been blessed today. And if you've heard these things and you are a blessed one, engage in the business and the activity of peacemaking. Thank you for watching today, and we look to see you back here real soon as we continue this series and wrap it up when we begin to talk about Tell Me Something I Didn't Know About the Beatitudes. God bless you. We'll see you next time.